Some people can miss you with their whole heart and still feel more uneasy the moment you get too close. They think about you constantly, but when the connection becomes more real, their body starts pulling in the opposite direction. It looks confusing from the outside. How can someone want you and still create distance? But this pattern is more common than it seems. Missing someone can feel safer than being fully reached by them. Because missing keeps love in a controlled space, closeness makes it immediate, visible, and hard to manage. When you miss someone, you can imagine them. You can long for them without having to fully risk yourself. You can replay the good moments. You can build warmth around what you hope they mean. But real closeness removes that protective blur. Now their tone matters, their consistency matters, their reactions matter. Now the connection can actually soothe you, which means it can also actually hurt you. That is the part many people never say out loud. They do not just fear rejection. They fear what happens when love becomes important enough to shake them. They fear needing something that now has the power to disappoint them. So longing becomes easier than receiving. Missing becomes easier than relaxing. Distance lets them feel deeply without being fully exposed. It lets them keep one foot outside the emotional fire. And if you have ever loved someone like this, you have probably felt it. They seem more open when you are not fully available. They text more when they sense space. They feel more affectionate after time apart. But once things start feeling secure, clear, and close, something shifts. Their warmth gets quieter. They hesitate more. They become harder to read right when you thought the bond was deepening. This is not always a sign that their feelings disappeared. Sometimes, it is a sign that their feelings became harder to control. Because closeness does something distance does not. It activates old emotional memory. Not always through obvious panic. Sometimes through subtle tension, overthinking, and the urge to take a step back. That step back can look small, a slower reply, a flatter tone, a sudden need for space. But emotionally, it can mean something huge. It can mean the connection crossed from pleasant into important. And importance is where self-protection wakes up. That is where the nervous system starts asking dangerous questions. What if this changes? What if I get used to this and lose it? What if I let them in and they stop showing up the same way? What if I care more than they do? For someone with a history of emotional inconsistency, these questions do not feel abstract. They feel practical. They may have learned early that affection could be warm one day and unavailable the next, that closeness could feel good and still become unsafe without warning. So now, even healthy intimacy can carry static. The body remembers what the mind is trying to be hopeful about. That is why some people are calmer when they are missing you than when they are sitting right next to you. Missing is painful but manageable. Closeness is beautiful but destabilizing. It brings relief and risk at the same time. And that combination can be overwhelming, especially for people who spent years trying not to need too much. They may look independent. They may even pride themselves on not asking for much. But under that self-control is often a very sensitive relationship to disappointment. They do not avoid closeness because they are empty. They avoid closeness because they know how deeply they attach once they let it matter, and they do not trust the landing. So they do something quiet and complicated. They let themselves miss you from a safe emotional distance. They think about reaching out, but wait. They reread your old messages instead of sending a vulnerable new one. They feel tender but become restrained. They miss you in private and manage you in person. That contrast can be hard to understand if you have never lived it. Why would someone soften in absence and tense up in connection? Because absence gives them imagination. Connection gives them exposure. Absence lets them feel love without having to negotiate the fear underneath it. Connection demands contact with both. This is why someone can genuinely miss you after a date, then feel strangely distant during the next one. The distance was never the real comfort. The fantasy of closeness without immediate risk was the comfort. Being with you again made the stakes return. Now they have to face your eyes, your silence, your expectations, their own hope. Now they have something living in front of them. And living things are harder to control than private longing. Private longing never asks you to speak plainly. Real closeness does. It asks for honesty at the exact moment honesty feels most exposing. So instead of saying, "I missed you, and that made me realize how much this matters," they say something safer. They joke, change the subject, or become a little cooler. It is not always intentional. A lot of this happens faster than language. Their body detects emotional risk before they can form a clear thought. Then, self-protection takes the wheel. That protection can look like emotional neatness. They become composed right when they are most stirred. It can look like needing space after a deeply connected moment. It can look like withdrawing after being seen too clearly. Maybe you share a beautiful night together. The conversation is honest. The chemistry feels effortless. The emotional closeness is undeniable. The next day, they seem less available. Not cruel, just thinner somehow. You feel the shift immediately. They insist nothing is wrong. And maybe nothing is wrong in the obvious sense, but something is activated. They are no longer just enjoying you. They are now feeling the weight of what you could mean. That weight can stir old alarms, not because you did something bad, but because intimacy itself can feel like a threshold. Once crossed, it is hard to go back to not caring. For guarded people, that is exactly what feels dangerous. So they may start managing the pace. They pull back to regulate how affected they feel. Or picture someone who misses you constantly when you're apart. They imagine texting you all day. But when your message pops up, they wait. They overthink a simple reply like it carries their entire dignity. If they answer too warmly, they feel exposed. If they answer too little, they feel false. So they sit in the middle and call a caution. Really, they are trying not to reveal how much your attention matters. This is one reason mixed signals happen. Not always because feelings are shallow, but because feelings are difficult to safely express. The person may be internally consistent and externally confusing. Their heart knows, but their defenses interrupt the delivery. And the more they like you, the stranger this can get. Small things start feeling bigger. A short reply can ruin their mood. A warm reply can make them feel relieved and suddenly vulnerable. They read into pauses. They notice slight shifts in energy. Then they tell themselves they are overreacting. Now they are not only unsettled, they are ashamed of being unsettled. That shame matters. People who feel safer missing you often do not just fear closeness. They fear being seen needing closeness. They fear the loss of composure that comes with honest attachment. So they become experts at having feelings privately. Publicly, they stay measured. They cry after you leave, then act casual when you ask how they are. They crave reassurance and still hate asking for it. They want to be chosen without having to reveal how badly they want it. That wish runs deep, because being reassured without asking can feel like proof. Proof that their needs are not too much. Proof that love can notice them before they have to risk asking. But relationships are rarely built on silent tests for that reason. The other person starts feeling a confusing push and pull. They can sense the tenderness, but cannot consistently reach it. They may feel wanted at a distance and held off up close. That hurts in a very specific way. And it hurts because the longing is real. The distance is real, too. One is the desire for closeness. The other is the fear of what closeness will unlock. That fear can come from many places. A parent who is loving but unpredictable. A past relationship where intimacy was later used against them. Years of having to stay emotionally organized around someone else's inconsistency. Whatever the source, the lesson becomes similar. Do not relax just because something feels good. Stay alert. Keep some part of yourself untouchable. So when love finally feels gentle, they do not instantly melt. Part of them starts scanning. They watch for the shift in tone. They listen for disappointment hiding under kindness. They ask themselves if your consistency is temporary. They brace for the part where the warmth changes shape. And if it does not change, another fear can rise. Now they have even more to lose. This is why healthy love can feel strangely harder to receive than chaotic love. Chaotic love is painful but familiar. Healthy love offers steadiness. Steadiness asks them to stop rehearsing emotional escape. That can feel unnatural at first. Not because they do not want peace, but because peace leaves them without their usual defenses. In distance, they can romanticize. In closeness, they have to reveal. In missing you, they can feel devoted without being watched. In loving you up close, they have to tolerate being affected in real time. That is a very different experience. One is longing with control. The other is intimacy with uncertainty. And uncertainty is hard for people who learn to survive by staying guarded. Still, it is important to say this clearly. Feeling safer missing someone does not make the pattern healthy. It may protect against immediate overwhelm, but it can slowly starve real connection. It keeps the heart active and the relationship underfed. Because love cannot fully grow in a place where distance keeps doing the job. Honesty should do. At some point, someone has to name what is happening. That might sound like, I miss you easily, but closeness scares me. It might sound like, when I pull back, it usually means I care more. It might sound like, I feel safest with love when I can control the distance. That sentence alone can unlock years of confusion. Not because it fixes the pattern overnight, but because it replaces mystery with truth. Now the relationship has something real to work with. Now longing is not the only language in the room. This is where emotional maturity begins, not in never feeling the urge to retreat, but in noticing when missing has become a hiding place, in noticing when distance feels safer because it asks less vulnerability from you. It means asking a hard question. Am I protecting my heart or keeping it unavailable even to what I want? It means recognizing that private devotion is not the same as relational closeness. Missing someone intensely does not automatically mean you are letting them know you. And that distinction changes everything, because a lot of people confuse strong feeling with emotional openness. They are not the same. You can feel everything and still stay unreachable. You can love deeply and still make someone feel alone beside you. You can miss them every night and still withdraw every time they move closer. That is not because your feelings are fake. It is because your defenses are protecting something tender and unconvinced. So the real work is not becoming less emotional. It is becoming more reachable inside your emotion. It is letting the person you miss encounter the version of you that usually only exists in private. The softer version. The version that does not just ache after they leave, but speaks before the distance returns. The version that says, I feel safer longing for you than relaxing with you. That sentence is vulnerable, but it is also clean. It tells the truth without turning the other person into a mind reader. It stops making closeness solve a puzzle it was never given. And for the person on the other side, that honesty is everything. It is far easier to meet fear than to decode mixed signals forever. Because distance without explanation can feel like rejection. Distance with truth can become intimacy. That is the difference. One leaves both people lonely. The other gives the relationship a chance, a real one. So if this pattern lives in you, do not shame yourself for it. There's usually a very human reason you learn to feel safest in longing. Maybe longing let you love without being interrupted. Maybe it let you feel deeply without risking direct disappointment. Maybe missing someone gave you control where closeness once made you feel helpless. That makes sense. But sense is not the same as freedom. And eventually, what protects you from pain can also protect you from being fully loved. Because the safest place emotionally is not always the truest one. Sometimes it is just the most familiar. And familiarity can keep people in beautiful forms of loneliness for years. They keep feeling love powerfully, but only at a distance they can survive. So maybe the deeper invitation is this. Stop assuming the place you feel least exposed is the place you are most safe. Sometimes real safety is not found in control. It is found in being known without having to disappear first. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is let closeness feel awkward, scary, and real without turning it into absence. Let it stay in the room. Because missing someone can feel poetic, but being known by them is what changes you. And some people feel safer missing you than getting closer to you, because missing keeps love beautiful. Closeness asks love to become true. That truth is riskier, but it is also the only place where trust can finally breathe.